the next round of war will, if it takes place, will be much, much more intense. A greater horizontal escalation by the Iranians, specific targeting of the Emirates, as well as other type of facilities that were not targeted before. The fiber optic cables underneath the Bed Sea in the Persian Gulf, that is accounting for roughly 99% of the internet traffic coming out of the region, as well as billions of dollars of transactions on a daily basis. To the Gulf of Aden, to data centers by American tech companies, all of them who do have some sort of a contract with the Pentagon that the Iranians have identified as, in their view, legitimate targets, which also then would add two additional benefits if they were to go after them from their perspective. One is to strike a significant lethal blow to the UAE's efforts to become the AI hub of the world through these data centers and all of the investments that they made in that. But also because of the fact that the Iranians are under the impression, right or wrong, that Trump is not terribly sensitive to US interests being pushed back, but he's very sensitive to his business interests and his business empire's interests being set back. And as a result, next time in the next war, don't just go after things that actually would be very bad for the US, go after things that would be very bad for Trump and his family's business interests.
I saw a report about this today. I saw a report about this today that they're considering striking his own personal interests, that of the Trump empire. Yeah. What's the source of that? Do you remember?
No, I don't know that news source, but I've had conversations with folks in Iran in which clearly they're looking at all of these different things. They escalated in a horizontal and unpredictable, or in a manner that was not predicted by the United States in the last war. That's what part of the reason why they got such an edge. And in the next war, they expect the United States to go at them much harder. And as a result, they're looking at different ways to escalate or counter-escalate that will be surprising to the United States.
Do you think
I think it's a devastating situation. I want to emphasize, whatever the world has suffered out of this, in terms of economic crisis, etc., is going to be nothing compared to what will come if this type of escalation takes place, the one that I've just explained. I think will be absolutely devastating for the world.
Yeah. If the war continues, based on what we've seen from both sides, unimaginable consequences, especially for the region, but for the entire world. The threats that have been made, not only threats, not empty threats, at least not on the Iranian side. Again, the strike on the nuclear power plant is a clear indication of how willing they are to escalate. I didn't ask you the basic question is, do you think that he did cancel strikes planned for tomorrow?
I don't think decisions have been made. I think they were seriously considering it, and he had requested briefings and plans to be presented to him. And it's actually very typical of him to kind of not make the decision until the last moment, or at least even if he has made a decision, not necessarily share it with anyone until the last moment. When he says that they were planned to take place and he called them off, that to me sounds too theatrical, too convenient, too much serving his interest of trying to give the impression that, I backed down because these leaders of the GCC asked me to. This is a face-saving way. I was willing to do it. I'm calling the shots. I'm in control of the situation. It serves that purpose, and I think it just sounded a little bit too convenient.
Yeah, I'm just looking. There's air defense activity in Isfahan, but it seems to be routine testing again. It's happening on a regular basis in Iran. Yeah, I agree. I think it was more of a plan, an option on the table in that meeting with the security team, with his advisors. It was an option on the table. He decided not to take it. But in his post, so there's some truth to his post that the option was there, but he made it obviously sound like it was an imminent strike that he rescheduled, either to make the Gulf countries, as you said, look good, and or to also show that he has control of what happens next. I'll ask you the question. I know I asked you that question earlier when we're doing this and the live had a glitch. So I'll ask it again because it's an interesting one. With this development, do you still believe, I don't know if you ever believed that, but do you still believe that the UAE wants this war to continue?
I certainly believed it earlier on, given a lot of the data points that were coming out, everything from some of the rhetoric of their leaders, the manner in which they had been struck, the fact that they were apparently involved in some of the strikes on Iran during the war itself, the visits by not only Netanyahu, but Naftali Bennett, the fact that the Israelis have deployed the Iron Dome in the UAE, which actually provides the UAE with greater protection, not in any way, shape, or form bulletproof, of course. All of these things suggested to me that it was not at all implausible that the Emiratis were pushing for it, and that their calculation was that they've crossed the Rubicon. And at this point, they're not going to be able to have a decent relationship with Iran in the future. So they're going to throw their lot entirely in with the Israelis and go for broke and go for a complete destruction of the theocracy in Iran and continued war. To me, that would be an absolutely foolish decision by them to take, but the rhetoric suggested that that is the direction they were going. But then again, I think we talked about it earlier on as well. A lot of these decisions made by many of the actors in the region, in retrospect, but also at the time, were very foolish. I always said from the outset that I thought the Abrams Accord was a very foolish decision from a strategic standpoint for the Emiratis to agree to, based on all kinds of strange bets that most of them have proven to be completely erroneous.
Which ones? What are the bets?
Well, first of all, there was this massive bet of thinking that the United States is going to remain as powerful of a player, that Israel's standing within the United States was so crucial that it would be the gatekeeper for other countries in the region to be able to have a strong relationship with the United States. We know now that is not the case. Saudi Arabia, for instance, did not sign the Abrams Accord and is now having a relationship that is completely independent of Israel. The Israelis cannot help him. MBS doesn't need the help of the Israelis. But moreover, and you and I have spoken about it before, the massive changes that are taking place in the United States in terms of support for Israel that is plummeting very, very fast. Those things may not have been very visible to many people. And I don't claim that I saw that at the time, but the strategic, and this is all setting aside what this is doing to the Palestinians, of course. But the idea that the Emiratis would tie themselves so closely to Israel, in what at the core of it was an alliance to balance against the Iranians and continue its isolation and containment, meant that the Emirates, that is just right next, across the waters from Iran, had tied itself to Israel's enmity with Iran, which is much deeper than that of Emirates' enmity with Iran, with the difference that Emirates is now a frontline state in that conflict. And we have seen clearly now that in such a war, they become the arena for that war. And, from a strategic standpoint, it just does not make any sense. Not at the time, certainly not now. Now, of course, now you have a different problem, which is they have become dependent on the Emirates in such a way that extracting yourself from that type of a close relationship will be very, very difficult and probably very...
Israelis, dependent on the Israelis,
exactly.
You mean?
Exactly.
Yeah, you said dependent on the Emirates.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. I have a counterpoint to this. We agree, okay. But I have another way of looking at it. What if, because we're assuming that Iran would not have attacked the Emirates as they have if the Emirates was not close to Israel. Because there's two reasons Iran attacked the Emirates. One of them is their close alliance to Israel, which fits the Iranian rhetoric. Doesn't mean it's the truth. And number two is because of it's just a much easier target. It impacts the global economy a lot more. It has that wow factor. They're a lot closer to the US. All the Western companies have hubs here more than any other country in the Gulf. And, obviously Saudi is another alternative, but the Saudis much bigger, much harder, and have much more capabilities in terms of being able to retaliate. The Saudis are fine getting into a war, at least not fine, but they're more capable of getting into a full-blown war than the Emirates, which are completely dependent on the aura of security and stability. So one could argue is that, no, the relationship with the Israelis was more... might have actually paid off because Israeli air defenses allowed them to intercept most of the attacks. So we're assuming Iran wouldn't have attacked if that relationship wasn't there. And I'm saying that assumption might be true, but maybe it wasn't. And maybe the Emirati idea of diversifying, because now they're getting air defenses from Egypt. I didn't know Egypt has them. And they already got from South Korea. And obviously they got the Iron Dome. So maybe to an extent it did pay off, considering that they've been able to intercept most of it.